my pleasure now to introduce our speaker for today, and that would be Bruce Shelton. Bruce is our senior pastor, and he's an integral part of this fellowship center, and I see him as the heart of the fellowship. He serves this church as a member of the pastoral council and as the current president of the board of directors. He is our music minister and observes and oversees many behind-the-scenes activities. I see Bruce affecting the lives of so many people with kindness, compassion, willingness to be of service, expressing his deep spiritual connection to Source. We love and appreciate you, Bruce. Let's give Bruce a warm welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. It's indeed my pleasure to have this opportunity to talk to you this morning. As is my custom, I'd ask that you help me with this talk and help yourself to benefit from this talk. If we can all just become quiet for a few moments, and let's just call upon God to use me as his minister this morning to say exactly the words that you need to hear that will be of the most help to you. Thank you, Lord. All right. Well, today is Palm Sunday, and at this time of the year is when I like to really talk about Jesus and his teachings, because Palm Sunday is all about Jesus. And one of the most important, I think actually the most important teaching that Jesus gave was all in this, today we call it the Sermon on the Mount. I remember a couple of months ago, Lloyd was saying that the Sermon on the Mount was one of the greatest gifts that God has given to us in terms of spiritual teachings. It ranks right up there with the Bhagavad Gita and the Tao Te Ching and other spiritual masterpieces. And Sermon on the Mount had a huge influence on my life. When I was around 16 years old, I was really having a tough time, like a lot of adolescents, just trying to find myself, trying to find what's it all about, you know? Who am I? What's the purpose of life? I'd read the newspaper. We didn't have the internet then, but we had the Virginian Pilot. We'd read the newspaper, and it's all this turmoil in the world. Gosh, things haven't changed much, have they? And I'd look at people I knew, at the church I attended then, conflicts, you know, and where I went to school. It just was kind of depressing, you know, and I was just struggling to try to find answers. And I reached out to God and says, I'd really appreciate if you kind of help me out here. And then one day when I was 16, I stumbled across this book at a bookstore, stumbled, quote unquote, called The Sermon on the Mount. And it was by this guy I'd never heard of named Emmett Fox. And for the very first time, I had an interpretation of the teachings of Jesus that finally made sense to me. Not only did they make sense, they made super sense, because I was able to take these interpretations, these teachings, and apply them to my life. And I began, right then is when my spiritual journey began. And I spent 2 years reading that book, meditating upon that book, trying to understand more and more the teachings of Jesus as they were interpreted to me by Emmett Fox. And that was like a foundation that I built at that time, that ever since then, everything I've learned spiritually has been built upon that foundation. So the Sermon on the Mount has been hugely important to me. And so in a way, I've kind of have been preparing for this talk today for the past 60 years. I have prepared more for this talk than any speaker's ever prepared for a talk who's been at this podium. Let me brag for a moment, right? So, all right. So the Sermon on the Mount begins with those teachings that we have all heard of. I've given you a handout on them called the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes are easy to remember because they all begin with the word blessed. That's probably the easiest thing to understand about the Beatitudes, because the problem we have with so much of the teachings, especially the Beatitudes, is that they're these extremely important teachings. They sum up everything Jesus came to teach us, but they're hard to understand. They're cloaked in language that's really hard. What does poor in spirit mean? What does being meek mean? And what does it mean to hunger and thirst after righteousness? So I've given 2 previous talks on the Beatitudes. One was back in April of 2023, and then I gave another one 2 months later actually 3 months later in July of 2023. And I've talked about 5 of the Beatitudes. So this is the 3rd in a trilogy of talks I've given on the Beatitudes. Today we're going to finalize it with the final 3 Beatitudes. Let me, there was, back in the 60s, there was we had Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Everybody loves Crosby, Stills, and Nash, all those baby boomers, right? And they wrote a song called Teach Your Children Well, and there was a line in there that said, we all need a code by which we can live by, right? And that's so true. And well, the Beatitudes provide us with a code by which we can live by once we understand them. So let me just recite to you the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they that hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be fulfilled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall be called, they shall see God. And then the last one is, blessed are they that are persecuted for my name's sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And this last one's interesting because Jesus does it, kind of he repeats it in 2 verses. It's another blessed here. Blessed are ye when men shall revile and persecute you and say all manner of evil against you for my name's sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. So those are the 8 Beatitudes. Let's take a look at them. Now today I'm going to look at 3 of them, the one dealing with mourning, the one dealing with peacemakers, and the last one dealing with persecuted for righteousness' sake. So let's get into it. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Mourning, Jesus, what does mourning have to do with enlightenment? What does mourning have to do with finding the Christ presence and realizing who I am? It doesn't go along with everything else Jesus teaches. Elsewhere he says, I have come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. I like that one, right? This mourning stuff, what does this mean? Is he talking about the type of mourning we experience, the deep sadness and depression when somebody dies that we dearly love, or we lose a job that we really love, or a partner that leaves us? That's one type of mourning. That's not really what Jesus is talking about here. And Paramahansa Yogananda is one of my favorite teachers, and he gave me an interesting perspective on this beatitude. He said that there was a point in time, right in the beginning of time, when we were all in a state of bliss. We all were living in the presence of God. We fully realized who we were. This is the Garden of Eden story that we all know well, found in Genesis. And then we were given free will. Unlike all other animals, we humans were given the choice of free will. And we used our free will to make a conscious decision to go against the laws of God. And because of that, we were cast out of the Garden of Eden into planet Earth. We ate of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and we found ourselves in a world that was filled with good, like Eden, right? But there was this evil part, this dark side, this dichotomy that we were all living in now. And since that time, we have suffered a lot. But deep down within us, all along, we've known that something was wrong with this picture, that that this is not the way things should be. We have been mourning our fall from grace, you see, mourning our loss of awareness of God's presence. And that mourning is pushing us along, you see, to seek God now. The suffering is Eckhart Tolle, I love the way he put it. He says, the greatest spiritual teacher in the world is not a spiritual teacher. What? Jesus? What about Jesus? Jesus is a pretty strong. He's more important than what Jesus taught. He says it's more important than any religion. He says the greatest spiritual teacher in the world is suffering, because suffering motivates us to break out of our egoic shell, out of this prison that we've created with all of our negative thinking. Suffering is actually moving us along. It affects everybody. It's universal. You don't have to be a Christian. You don't have to be a Hindu. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be poor. We all know what suffering is. And it's suffering, it motivates us to seek to break free. And so we have been suffering a lot, and we've been mourning the loss of our fall from grace. And now we're on the return journey home, which is what Jesus' teachings were all about. Everybody with me so far? And now another perspective, see, the beautiful thing about these Beatitudes is that they can be understood on different levels, depending on who you are, where you're at in your spiritual growth, in your spiritual maturity. So another perspective on the Beatitudes has to do with this idea of we associate mourning with death. So the question is, death of what? Jesus is talking about death of our old self, death of the old Adam, death of who we think we are, death of who we think we are right now at this moment. And we go through this teaching about of dying and being born again is a fundamental teaching of Jesus. The idea is when we are born again, we actually literally become a new person. With the Christ, you see, we're one with God. We realize finally who we are. And we're a much happier person. That's one nice thing about it. And so the idea is we have this teaching on mourning is that we die to be reborn again into new life. Michael Singer says that, who's one of my favorite spiritual teachers, says that the entire spiritual path consists of letting go, letting go, letting go. Dying to the old, dying to the old, dying to the old. Letting go of what? Dying to what? Well, there was this little girl, a 16-year-old girl. Her daddy had a little talk with her one day. He says, honey, you used to go to church with us every Sunday, and all of a sudden, the past couple of years, you haven't been going to church. Why not? She says, well, Daddy, when I get older like you, I'm going to be going to church a lot, but right now, Daddy, I just want to have fun. What the little girl didn't understand is what we're asked to give up are actually parts of us that cause us to suffer. A part of us that we're asked to sacrifice on the cross, gosh, that's another important symbol, isn't it, in Christianity, are all negative thoughts within our head that we've carried too long, such as resentments, regrets, jealousy, selfishness, criticisms of others and ourselves, traumatic memories, greed, need for power and control over others. That's where we're asked to give up, you see. It all has to go. And as it goes, we're slowly, you see, coming closer and closer to God and being reborn. Okay. This takes us to the next beatitude I'd like us to take a look at. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Now, this is an easier one to understand, isn't it? Peacemaker. I like that one. This morning was a tough one, but we all understand what a peacemaker is. Of course, it's really important to be a peacemaker just in our own personal lives, bringing peace in our family if we can. Most families have got conflicts of some type or the other, so anything I can do to bring peace to my family, I do that. Peace to my workplace if I'm working, peace to my church when I'm involved with the church, especially on different committees. We want to be a peacemaker. Maybe it's our good karma to work for the State Department, and we have the opportunity to actually be paid to do our best to bring peace on earth between nations. Most of us don't have that karma. But this beatitude actually goes a step deeper. This beatitude is actually all about finding our own inner peace. You see, our peace within. Until we find our peace within, we're just not happy, you know. When our minds are agitated with a lot of negative thoughts, worried about this, you know, angry about this, depressed about that. When we get it, we all know it. You all know what I'm talking about. You know, when we get like that, we've lost our peace, you see. And Jesus is saying here, blessed are the peacemakers, for they should be called the children of God. The truth is, we're all the children of God, but we've forgotten who we are. But once we find our inner peace, you see, we then remember who we are. And Psalm 46, one of the most powerful teachings in the Bible, says, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. This stillness is absolutely essential in order to know God, you see. Eckhart Tolle says that when we lose touch with our inner stillness, we lose our touch with ourselves. When we lose touch with ourselves, we lose ourselves in the world. It's a pretty good way to put it. He also says, silence is the language of God. All else is a poor translation. So how do we find this inner peace? You know, okay, Bruce, you're making sense. I want to find my inner peace. Okay, got that. How do I do it? You know, we all want peace. It's so hard because our mind just keeps going like this infamous voice in the head, constantly bringing up negative thoughts that go through our head. Well, the solution is a spiritual solution, you know, and that is through the practice of daily prayer and meditation. There's just no substitute for putting aside a little time every day just to be with God. We put aside a little time every day, maybe a lot of time, to feed our bodies, don't we? Going to the grocery store, buying food, preparing it, eating it. We don't neglect our bodies, do we? How about our soul? You know, how much time do we spend feeding our soul? Our soul is starving if we're not feeding it. You see, and is nothing more important than our physical body is our spiritual self, feeding our soul, which is the presence of God within us. It enables us to connect with the greater whole that we call God. And so it's so important. Just as for myself, I've shared this many times. I always, ever since I met Emmett Fox, and they kind of taught me this, I put aside an hour every day just to feed my soul, you know, care of the soul. You know, you deserve it. This is my gift to myself, is to put an hour aside every day to calm down. Chill, Bruce, you know. You're all worried about this, worried about that. You know, for 52 years, I worked as a counselor, working with people with problems. And there's no way I could help other people with their anxiety problems and depression problems and anger problems if I didn't first fix myself, right? And this hour a day enabled me whenever I had problems and I'd be stressed out maybe by something I heard somebody telling me the day before, because that's the type of job you don't just walk away from it like you would like a job site and a construction site, you know. When you're a counselor, you kind of take on a lot of the energy. So every day I'd put aside an hour and I'd start off by writing my prayers. I always tell people really helps me to center. If I start praying verbally to God, within not very long, my mind starts wandering, and I don't stay focused. But I write to God, like Jesus said, talk to God like He's your best friend, you see. And when you write a letter, it's like a very personal message to someone you love. I remember when I was a kid, I used to write to my grandmother up in New York. You could really be personal, So I write a very personal letter to God. God, help me with this relationship problem I've got, or help me with this, help me to get over this resentment I've got towards somebody. Help me with this, help me with that. And the best way to pray is to do it affirmatively, not begging. We don't pray to God like we're a beggar. We pray to God like we're His son or His daughter, okay? God, I thank you for helping me with this problem, Prayer of thankfulness is the most powerful way we can pray. Thank you, God, for healing this situation. That's a statement of faith. And so with meditation, what's the difference between prayer and meditation? Well, Edgar Casey said that prayer was talking to God, meditation was listening to God, right? And interestingly, we have 2 ears and 1 tongue, right? 1 mouth. So it's really important to do a lot of listening. And Ram Dass said that meditation is all about calming the heart and quietening the mind. Calming the emotions of the heart, right? And quietening these thoughts in the mind. Beautiful way to understand meditation. And so I'd recommend that you consider, if you haven't already done this, creating a little altar in your house, you see, that you put aside. When I started doing this, I had an apartment. The only private place I had was my own bedroom. So I just simply got a chair, had a window, chair facing the window, I actually got a board and put some cinder blocks, but I put some burlap around the cinder blocks to make it look good. I didn't have a lot of money back in those days, and back in my 20s, right? But I built this little board, and then I put a family Bible on it with a cross, and right there in voila, I had an altar. Then I went to Pier 1 Imports and bought one of those bamboo curtains that just would hang from the ceiling. And in my bedroom, now I had a private space that was my meditation room. And over the years, I kept adding different things as I'd go around the world. I'd found a cross in Iona, for example, and found some rocks I picked up at Qumran in Israel. But I have all these on my altar now. And every time I'm in my meditation, and now I have a house, so I actually have a whole room that's my meditation room, which is really fantastic. And I have beautiful stained glass windows and candles and music. I'm just sharing all this with you to encourage you to consider creating an altar in your house. It can be very simple, but this is your space. If you look at your home, everything in your home serves a purpose. You got the dining room and the kitchen and the bedrooms and the bathrooms. They all serve a purpose. What part of your room is set aside to feed your soul, right? It's not complicated, just find a quiet place, and I reckon this is so helpful because it then helps you to focus more when you're doing your prayers. Okay, let's move ahead to the last beatitude here. Blessed are they who are, blessed are they who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for they shall be, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are ye when men shall revile and persecute you for my name's sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. And so this is a hard one to understand. Is Jesus saying we should all be martyrs? And certainly the first 300 years of Christianity, there was thousands of people died as martyrs. They refused to renounce their faith and worship the gods of Rome, and the price for that was death in the Colosseum, a horrific death. And so is Jesus saying we should all go out and be martyrs? Well, if that's your karma, that's one thing. But most of us don't have that. We don't need to do that. That's not really the focus of what this Beatitude is all about. This Beatitude has to do more with the struggle that we all go through in our own heads as we seek to live in accordance with our highest ideals, okay? Everybody hear that? Live in accordance with my highest ideals. If your highest ideal, as is mine, is to be loving to people, to be a channel for God's love, if that's your highest ideal, then, okay, anytime I'm less than loving, you see, I'm missing the mark. What does the word sin mean? Sin means to miss the mark. It's literally, that's the translation. So anytime I miss the mark and I don't live in accordance with my highest ideals, I am committing a sin. But this is the big struggle because it's so hard to do this. Somebody says something to me that's upsetting. Maybe they try to humiliate me, embarrass me. I leave a meeting, and I'm just feeling angry at that person. How could this person talk to me like that? And if I don't know better, you see, my mind will grab that thought. How can they treat me like this? And it will start, a whole chain of other thoughts will start following. Like, this is terrible what they did. That person's going to get theirs one of these days. I hope they have the same, someone embarrasses them like this. And is this anybody relate to what I'm talking about? It's the way our minds go, right? That's called choosing to walk the low path, the low road, right? What if I choose to walk the high path? And I do this mainly because I understand the toxicity of negativity in my own head. A resentment is a negativity in my own head. When we have a resentment towards anyone, what we're doing is allowing that person, right, to rent space in my own head. Now, why in the world would I want to do that? It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I got up, just used the restroom. I come back, trying to go to sleep. And all of a sudden, this thought, you know how thoughts are, they just come to my head about this resentment I had towards somebody who did something 10 years ago, right? And now I can't go back. And then my mind starts thinking about it, right? And so why in the world would I want to hold on to a resentment? Resentments just hurt me much more than it hurts the other person I'm upset with, right? So, okay, because I'm aware of that, I carry anything like this, any resentments. My favorite other ones are like regrets. Anybody ever said anything in your life in which you regret and you say, God, I wish I could turn the clock back and do that again? We all do, of course. Regrets, traumatic memories. Anybody ever had any traumatic memories happen to them? Anything? We all have. Now, there's two types of trauma. There's trauma with a capital T and trauma with a little t. If you're fortunate, you have never had the trauma with the capital T. That would create post-traumatic stress disorder, for example. But all of us have had little traumas. Everything from being in chemistry class when I was a senior in high school and being embarrassed by the chemistry teacher who would always ask everybody questions that nobody knew the answer to, and nothing worse than being embarrassed in high school class, right? Well, that carry that memory, yeah. So it's a little t, right? And okay, so I go to every day in my daily prayer, I say, God, take this depression from me. I'm feeling a sense of despair, sadness. I feel hopeless and helpless. Take this from me, Lord. I offer it up to you. Jesus says, ask and you shall receive. Knock and the door shall be open to you. Seek and you shall find. So let's take Jesus at his word. And so we offer up our depressions, our regrets, our resentments, anything we want to put on that cross, right? That's what Palm Sunday and Easter is all about. It's letting go, dying to the old to be reborn to the new. And so this is the work we have. It's so important when we're upset with someone. One of my favorite teachings of Jesus, I think Marcus Pfeiffer said this, shared with us this last week. In Matthew, this is in the Sermon on the Mount, he says, you have heard that it was said, You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Okay, that's understandable. No, he says, but I say unto you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun to shine on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. So it all comes back to love, you see. This has been preached up here by many people, many Sundays. Everything always comes back to love. Either we have unconditional love for others or we don't. It's not complicated. And when we don't have unconditional love, we know it. And when we choose not to have, we choose anger, judgment, criticism, rather than love, we're missing the mark, right? Which we all know what that means now, right? And so we don't want to do that. So this is the battle, see, that goes on in our own head. This is the persecution of our own thoughts persecuting us as we seek to choose the high road. Okay, well, that brings me to a close here. And I hope this has been helpful to you. I love each one of you very much. God bless you. God bless you.